Hello everyone, Greg here again with How to Read Music. This is Lesson 1-2, Piano Music and the Grand Staff. So, here is part of the piano keyboard, and here is a staff with a treble clef on it. The treble clef, or G clef, is used to indicate high notes. It does not mean right hand, so if you see the treble clef, don't assume that it means right hand. If you look at it like this, you'll see a G in it, and it's used to mark that that line is a G. So if we have that note on that line, that is a G. Go up a bit to not the top space, but the second space from the top of the treble staff. That is treble C. That's an important note. I need you to memorize that one. Moving on, here is the bass clef, also known as the F clef. It's used to indicate low notes. It does not mean left hand. And it's called the F clef because there's an F right there. The two dots mark the F line. And if you have a note on that line, it's an F. Go down a bit, not to the bottom space, but the second space from the bottom, and that is bass C, and I need you to memorize that. So, this is the entire full-size piano keyboard. It has 88 keys, I counted. There, I saved you about 5 minutes. It's a lot to take in, but we do know that next to the sets of 2 black keys is always a C. So if there's 2 black keys right to the left, that is C. And if you go up in the musical alphabet, you'll find that the top note of a standard piano keyboard is also a C. So for now, we'll just look at the one in the middle, which is called middle C. Now, let's say we have a staff on top and a staff on the bottom, connected by a brace, and usually a bar line at the end. This is called the grand staff. The top staff is used for the right hand. The bottom staff is used for the left hand. And normally, if we're sitting comfortably in the middle of the keyboard, the right hand is going to be sitting on the high notes of the keyboard. So we usually have a treble clef on the top staff for the right hand. And the left hand is going to be sitting on the low notes of the keyboard, so we put a bass clef on the bottom staff for the left hand. It's not always that way. There are exceptions, which we'll get to later, but normally this is the most common configuration of the grand staff. So there's our G. Now, you need to know that this is not just any G, but it is this specific G. There's lots of G's on the piano, but it's this one, the G above middle C. And treble C, once again, is not just any C on the piano, but it's the C above middle C. So there's treble C, there's middle C, treble C. That's where treble C is. This, you know, is F, but again, not just any F. It's that F right there, the F below middle C. And bass C, not just any C, but the C below middle C. So that one right there. Now that I've shown you those, let's see if you can remember them. That's F. That's treble C. And bass C. And G. Okay, so we have these 4 landmarks. Let's see if we can figure out some notes using those landmarks. What's this? Well, it's a step above treble C, so it is that D on the keyboard. Here's a second below bass C, so it's that B. Here's a step above G, so it's that A. Here's a third below bass C, so it's that A. It's a different A. There's lots of A's, but that note is that one. And how about this? A third above that F, yet another A. And a third above treble C is that E. So, with just these 4 landmarks, we can find these notes on the staff and these notes on the piano keyboard. There is a gap in the middle, so let's see if we can figure that out. Here is the G above middle C, so let's work our way down. F, E, D, C, and there's middle C. It's written like that. It's one ledger line below the treble staff. And here is F. Go up a step to G, A, B, C, and again it's middle C. This is middle C on the bass staff. Now sometimes middle C will be introduced like this, just a note floating on a line right between the two staffs, but that's not really correct. You're not going to see it written that way. You will see it written one of two different ways. You'll either see a middle C on the ledger line just below the treble staff, and you'll see it written as a ledger line just above the bass staff. So it's two different ways of writing middle C. The same note, just written two slightly different ways. So if you know where middle C is, there's D, and there's E. And working down on the bass staff, there's B, and there's A. So there's those missing notes we didn't have before. And there, we now know all of the notes on that wide swath of the piano keyboard. Let's look at this again. Every good boy deserves fudge. F-A-C-E. Good boys do fine always. All cows eat grass. Whew, that's a lot to remember. Basically, this requires you to know the name of each line and space on the staff. Yes, these are mnemonic devices that can help you to remember, but even if you like mnemonic devices, these are four different sayings for four very similar things, and I will often see people get confused and get them mixed up, and a lot of students take a long time trying to learn which saying stands for which thing, which is for the top staff, which is for the bottom staff, which is for the spaces, which is for the lines. For example, I can't tell you how many times I've had this happen in a lesson. This note will come up and the student will say, oh, that's an E. I'll say, really? Why? Because every good boy, no, it's not an E. That is a G because it's on the bass staff. Okay, so I think those sayings can be helpful, but they can also be confusing. So I'm just showing you a different way to learn to read, which is compatible with the mnemonic devices, but it's just another way. I'm just having you memorize where the C's are, and these three landmarks on the treble staff, these three landmarks on the bass staff. As a matter of fact, these two you don't even need to memorize because there's a picture of a G and a picture of an F telling you right where they are. So it's really only four landmarks. Two of them are the same note. And you need to know that this G is not just any G, it's that one, but it's between treble and middle C, so it makes sense that that's where it would land on the keyboard. This F is that F on the keyboard between middle C and bass C, so it makes sense that it would be there on the keyboard. And there you have it. Isn't this so much nicer? It's elegant and less cluttered. It's logical and it makes sense. The notes on the staff and on the piano go in alphabetical order and they go in the same order. So let's take advantage of that fact. And if you do, using just those few landmarks, you can read all of this in a short time with just a reasonable amount of practice. Now, while we're at it, let's debunk a few more myths. You recall me telling you this at the beginning. The treble clef does not mean right hand. The bass clef does not mean left hand. Let me show you kind of what we're talking about. Normally, we're sitting like this at the keyboard with the right hand on the high part and the left hand on the low part, but sometimes you'll be playing music where both hands will be playing above middle C on the high part of the piano. So each staff, the right hand and the left hand, will have a treble clef. So when you see that, that's what that means. Sometimes you'll have both hands playing on the low part of the keyboard, and you'll have two bass clefs. That's all that means. You'll even have this somewhat less common occurrence where the left hand will cross over the right hand. So you'll have a treble clef on the bottom staff. Now, This won't happen for a while, but if you stick with piano for 6 months or a year, it's gonna come up. Okay, so I'm taking a little extra time now to explain how this works to save you a little time later. Now, let's say we see this note written on this configuration of the grand staff. Where is that on the keyboard? There it is. It's that G. So, that's the grand staff. Coming up, lesson 1-3. A few more notes, a few more intervals. And with just a few more notes and intervals, you will be able to read just about everything that will come up until we get to the black keys, which will be the lesson after that one. Goodbye.